Okay, so with that, welcome to our first ever real estate roundtable. And I've already lost my notes. Thank you. Here we go. I'll start that one over again. Welcome to the Collection Summer 2020 Real Estate Roundtable. I'd like to take a moment and begin by introducing our guest panelists. Beginning with Dave Wilkes. Dave Wilkes is president and CEO of BILD. With 1,500 member companies, BILD is the voice of the home building, land development, and professional renovation industry in the Greater Toronto Area. I think it should also be noted that this industry provides about $33 billion in investment value and employs 271,000 people in the region. Winnie Chan is Vice President, Sales Management for Tridel, one of Canada's leading developer and builders of condominium residences. To date, Tridel is responsible for producing over 85,000 homes. And in 2019, they were awarded the Ontario Home Builder of the Year by the Ontario Home Builders Association. Congratulations, Winnie. And Ben Myers is the president and owner of Bullpen Research and Consulting, Inc., with over 15 years of real estate research experience in both the US and Canada. Ben has established himself as an industry expert and a go-to source for the latest information and insights on the domestic residential housing market. And lastly, Michael Kalles is president of Harvey Real Estate Limited Brokerage. Over the past 25 years, Michael has helped build the company from 147 million in gross sales to almost $2.5 billion in 2019 alone. One of Michael's core values is giving back to the community, and today Harvey Real Estate supports over 250 charitable organizations. Welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for taking part in today's session. I'd like to begin with David Wilkes. A lot has gone on over the last few months. How would you say the construction industry has changed since the start of COVID-19?
So thank you very much, Jeremy, and appreciate the opportunity to join the discussion with my colleagues on the panel. What was very interesting for me from the beginning of the pandemic is that the construction industry was able to continue to work. It was designated an essential workplace by the provincial government right from the beginning, moving into an increasingly different aspects of the industry. So I think that there was a sense of responsibility that came with that to ensure that the health and safety of the workers was maintained, which was the precondition to be able to work. But where I think there has been a change in the industry, and I think some of my colleagues on the panel will be able to comment more. It's just the way the relationship with the consumer, the making sure that we didn't use the excuse of the pandemic not to get things done, whether that was from virtual showings of units, whether that was inspections, whether that was working with our municipal partners to ensure that inspections were continuing. So what I really think happened is, given the fact that the industry was able to continue throughout this period, you've seen innovation to ensure that the responsibility of continuing was facilitated by not looking for excuses, but looking for solutions and a wide number of things. So it's been an innovative time, in my opinion.
I attended an Outlook session at BILD earlier this year, and the speaker was saying that 2020 was going to have close to 20,000 closings in the high-rise sector alone. Is that still the case, or have we seen significant delays?
Yeah. Well, to quote a phrase, we're having a record year, which I think is a lyric from a song. But up until mid-March, sales in both low-rise and high-rise were off the charts. They're exceeding 10-year averages. It was going to be a historically strong year. April, the ground fell out. What I find interesting, Jeremy, is that the ground fell out as far as the number of sales, but the pricing held, which I think is a really important thing to recognize, and a bit of a backbone for the industry. We're eagerly awaiting the numbers for this most recent period of time from Altus, who we partner with on that. But I don't know that we're going to get to the numbers that were projected by the speaker at our Outlook breakfast, but I think that the strength of the market has been one of the key factors throughout the pandemic. and it's reflected in the fact that the price points have held pretty well. So I think sales will be down for sure, but I think the longer term prognostication for the market is pretty strong. What I keep my eye on is immigration. 400,000 new residents came to the country every year, and a large majority of them would come to the GTA. So, sorry, 400,000 to the GTA every year. Sorry. So I think that's a key part of the market that is not part of the current reality, and so that's going to be something that we're watching very closely.
The government was pretty quick to reopen below grade construction. Did you agree with the timing on that? And how important would you say the construction industry is going to be in this economic recovery?
It's going to be very important for a couple of reasons. So first question, Jeremy, yes, we agreed with the timing. Ourselves with our colleagues at the Ontario Home Builders Association, we're in regular discussions with the province about the ability to open up construction. As I said, from the very beginning, with focus on those units that were near occupancy to below grade to above grade and so on and so forth, the various stages of the opening, all under the precondition of ensuring a safe and healthy working sites. I'm very pleased that of the 350 WSIB claims that have been registered to my most recent knowledge, which is a couple days old now, none of those 350 cases related to COVID-19 were from the construction industry. So we're very proud of that. We're very grateful for the opportunity to continue to work. And I think the site supervisors as well as the individual workers did a tremendous job in maintaining the safety of the site. So yes, we did agree with that approach. I forget the second part of your question. I'm sorry.
How important is the industry to the economic recovery?
Thank you. How could I forget that question? Two aspects of it. I think the GTA is going to be very important to the recovery. If you look at the importance of the GTA's economy, both nationally and provincially, 20% of the country's GDP is a result of the activity in the Greater Toronto Area, and 50% of the activity as it relates to the province. So if you accept the premise that the GTA will be a key driver of the economic recovery that will follow the pandemic, I think you also have to accept that the construction industry is a key driver of the region's economy, and the multipliers that we have within the construction industry are some of the highest ones across the industrial mix. So we believe we have a responsibility to be part of the recovery and to drive the region's economy. And we actually just released earlier this week a paper that had 20 recommendations federally, provincially, and municipally on how construction activity could be stimulated, investing in some things like infrastructure projects, and as well, just looking at the lessons that we've learned from the pandemic around decision making and the nature of the business, and a bit which I would summarize as a cultural change. And we believe that some of those changes that were created by the near-term urgency of keeping the industry working, those are lessons that can be learned there and move them forward into a more normal environment. So it has to run through the GTA, the recovery. And in my belief, that requires the construction industry to be front and center in that.
We'll be sure to share your recommendations to our audience. I'm going to shift the conversation to Ben Myers now. Ben, the CMHC predicts a drop in average housing prices between 9 and 18% over the next 12 months, and have tightened the rules around mortgage insurance eligibility as of July 1st. You know, understanding that these figures are Canada-wide, what do you think this means for buyers and sellers in the GTA?
Well, whenever you see a forecast come out from a well-respected and unbiased organization by CMHC, it certainly has an impact. Part of the reason that people buy homes and part of the decision that goes into their purchasing of a home is their expectation of future growth of those units. So if they think the prices are going to go down, they may put off those decisions moving forward. So CMHC does hold some weight when they make a forecast like that. Just looking at the GTA numbers over the last couple of weeks, it seems like the market is bouncing back fairly quickly. We're starting to see homes, sell well above asking price. We're seeing multiple offers. We're seeing, some supply come back on the market, but the demand seems to be there. So, if the rest of the country is anything like Toronto, I think the national numbers will be fine. As Dave mentions, that GTA is such a huge portion of the overall national numbers. In terms of the changes to the mortgage insurance rules, it will be interesting to see what the impact will be, because Genworth and Canada Guarantee did not follow the CMHC changes, meaning the minimum credit score of 680, no borrowed down payments, and there was a change to the GDS. TDS, I think I'm using the right acronym there. So it will be interesting to see if a lot of that business gets put over to Genworth and Canada Guarantee, and CMHC loses some of its market share in that space. So in the end, for me, the share of mortgage insurance across those three companies is inconsequential. So if we can, make sure we're getting those first-time home buyers and people who have less than 20% to get into the market, I think that's a huge benefit over them renting. And the rental market has declined a little bit, but I think it's still beneficial for, in my mind, to people to own versus rent their own home.
So, you've talked about multiple offers. Do you anticipate any softening, at least temporarily, in the regional real estate market?
There's a potential. Obviously, there's this term that's getting thrown around fairly often called the deferral cliff. So a lot of the lenders allowed up to 6 months of deferred mortgage payments. And it was I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it was much larger than I would have anticipated, the number of people that actually took advantage of that. And we don't know how many of people took and went and applied for those mortgage deferrals just because they were worried about losing their job. Not that they had lost their job, or not that they were actually in trouble paying their mortgage. So that's kind of the big unknown. If you look at the job losses nationally, they seem to be concentrated very heavily in the renter households versus the ownership households. They happened in the service industry, the retail industry, manufacturing, people who can't work from home. So it will be interesting to see what once we get to that deferral cliff, what happens then. Once we start to see more of these Toronto condo completions come on, if we start to see a potential oversupply in the marketplace. We saw a lot of these former short-term rentals come on to the rental market and into the resale market as the tourist industries dried up, and the kind of the part-time work and contract work from people outside of the GTA, that's dried up as well. So it will be interesting to see, if those move back into that Airbnb or short-term rental space, and that supply dries up as well. So it's certainly a lot of balls in the air to see. But if I was a betting man, I wouldn't bet against the GTA real estate market. It seems to be extremely resilient, and maybe that's the fact that new condo prices have gone up for 25 consecutive years, so encompassing more than my real estate career. So I wasn't around in the 80s, so maybe my viewpoint is a little tainted.
You also mentioned a drop off in rental prices. Is that, and by the way, you produce an incredible rental report, which I share with our agents. Is that drop off temporary, just to motivate people to move during the COVID time, or do you think these prices are here to stay?
Yeah, so I do work with a company called rentals.ca, which is a national listings platform. So they send me their 14,000 listings across the country, and I do some analysis for them. So we had started to see some softness in the downtown Toronto condo market. So and I don't think it was about demand, it was about affordability. When you start to get $5 per square foot rents at 500 square feet, that's $2,500 a month. So that's a pretty expensive unit. So you're starting to get a lot of pushback. The purpose-built rental market was still seeing fairly large growth last year in the neighborhood of 7 to 9%. And even in areas like Scarborough, we're seeing 15, 20% growth in certain projects. So people were having to seek out alternative areas to rent because they just could not afford to live downtown. The reason potentially that is a problem is there's a lot of projects going in downtown, and a lot of those units is in some projects as many as 90% of the units were bought by investors with the sole purpose of renting them out. So if we're not seeing the rent growth there, maybe that will impact investor purchases and then ultimately cause supply to decline in the future. So it's a lot of steps there. But I do think kind of the part of the drop is certainly related to COVID-19, the pandemic. People are nervous about moving. They're nervous about, just the health issues with touring properties and going out and looking. So that's certainly been a factor. But they can't be evicted right now. There's certainly some people that would have been moving and kind of getting the market. I guess people moving from property to property. So some of that is not happening because of the eviction ban. How much of it, I don't know. But yeah, like the rental market is also being impacted, like I mentioned, by that short-term rental supply coming on. So I think that will be a one-time kind of infusion of supply. And then after that, I think it will be gone and we'll be back to being really severely undersupplied in the rental market.
I'd like to turn to Winnie now. Winnie, how have declining rents impacted the investor market, which plays such a large role in Toronto's pre-construction condo market?
Now, first of all, as a developer, we do represent multiple projects in Toronto from different areas and different sizes. Actually, if you look back, Jeremy, for the last few years, we've started to move away from just investor-inclined smaller dwelling units, but we're moving into home-sized condos too. So it's a tale of two cities. Yes, we are still attracting investors, but as time goes by in many of our communities, in the waterfront, in the Lawrence Park area, on Shepherd, even in Thornhill, we're seeing home-sized condos. So when I refer to that, we're building on average 2,000 to 4,000 square feet condos. And with today's price, you can add up to those numbers, and they might not particularly draw to investors, say. So when we're looking at this, now our investors, yes, they are not as happy when they see that there's problems with tenants, but most of them understand that this could be a short-term effect from Airbnb. Now, when you look back to the mode of investment in a condominium, all the seasoned investors understand they usually act fast and come at the beginning of a launch. And they do understand that the period of time from delivery can be anywhere from 3 to 5+ years. And they're leveraging the 20% deposit they're putting in. So rental income is important, but it's not as important as the appreciation. This old saying, I'm sure everybody remembers that, difference between inflation and appreciation is ownership. So the rental income is a bonus to sustain all the expenses, but the main aim of the investors is for the appreciation because they are buying into the future. So our seasoned investors are being more careful, making a decision right now. Careful in the sense that they're looking for developers that they can trust, that they will deliver the products. They are looking for developers that probably through the last many different crises, lack of a better term, do not go through random discounting on pricings and throwing out freebies and whatnot. I'm sure this audience is mature enough to remember quite a few crises that we went through. The 2008 financial crisis, we went through 9/11, we went through SARS. Some of you might be mature enough to remember 1980, 89 when the market drops, right? So in all these senses, we've got a proven track record of not doing random discounting. So the investors do have their faith in this, in still investing right now, although they're being more careful in making choices.
How have sales launches been affected? Has there been much put on hold, and do you expect to see a flood of new releases from builders come September?
So 2020, Tridel did have around 4 launches on our plate that we've planned out. Jeremy, I still remember visiting your brokerage and sharing one of our luxury condominium marketplace from Thornhill just shortly before the pandemic. So we did launch a boutique condo, and that condo in Thornhill is anywhere priced from 1.2 to 6 million. The timing is that the signing of the APS, the Agreement of Purchase and Sales, happens in March. So we're really right in the midst of pandemic starting. Now, the interesting fact is, of course, with condo prices from $1 million to $6 million, I think the investment portion is smaller and the end user portion is larger. What we found is the larger the homes, the faster they're going, even in March. We have a very low rescission rate. So the rescission time period, the 10 days rescission period for new condo, hits into the pandemic. We have a very low rescission rate. So that launch is kind of like halfway through the pre-launch activities. We did some signing and we stopped advertising from mid-March on. From March to mid-April, I have to say, everybody is stopping activities and watching as to what's going on. As Dave mentioned, we're lucky enough, out of the two different times that they will qualify essential service in Ontario, both construction and sales are considered essential service. So as far as the sales department, we did shrink down from about 7 different presentations office into one main area where I can rotate staff and stagger so that we're mindful of all the PPEs, of the number of head counts and all the servicing. But there are a lot of servicing happening from March to April. Like everyone's asking about deposits, because the stock market was taking a very deep dive at that time. And there are a lot that are worried that they have to realize from the stock market in order to put the deposit in. So developers like ourselves and others have been coming up with some innovative plans to help split or ease off deposit just for a month or 2 or 3, so that they can, well, right now, everything is back to normal. An example is one of our downtown project called The Well at Front and Spadina. It was sold last year, sold very well between the 3 towers, but majority of the deposit is due May and April this year. When I look at the numbers, I've got about $15 million of deposit collectibles coming in within that month. Now that we're through it, maybe that's 1% problem. 99% have paid the deposit in time, so that is a good sign. Now, as far as the other 3 launches that we have, of course, in this period of time is from March to April, we are stepping back to service everyone who's worrying about deposit, worrying about occupancies, worrying about potential delays and whatnot. But from May on, we're actually pleasantly seeing sales activities starting again. Now, of course, Tridel have spent a lot of time with staff working at home, working on virtual presentations, signing virtual deals. We've introduced a live chat platform for those who want to connect with us instantaneously through virtual to either through servicing and sales. Now that has been ongoing, but since May, we've been seeing deals coming in again. Now for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I'm just quickly counting, we've got $16 million of deals written. And majority of them, actually every single one of them is over $1 million. I do not have one set that's under $1 million. Average price point is around $2 million on what is sold. We did have some model suite, meaning inventories that we've used as a model suite, and we do virtual iGuide tours. We actually, ironically, in Lawrence Park have a model suite that's priced close to $3 million with multiple offers coming in last week, and it's sold firm. So that's something to share. But as far as the other new launches, we're preparing and we're waiting to see some more signs and feel the pulse before we launch the new launches.
Well, I'm interested in the launches, for example. We've all been to countless launches with hundreds of people there, hundreds of buyers, hundreds of agents lined up around the corner to get in. And when you have a crowd, it creates a kind of a hype that forces people to, strongly consider the opportunity. When we can't have a crowd, how do you launch a housing project? Do you need hype to sell? And do you expect builders will be maybe changing the marketing bonuses to entice buyers?
As far as marketing bonus, so far I do not see any particular developer that's going through price drops, as Ben and Dave have mentioned. The price is sustaining. The activities are not as strong. The number of volume of trade are not as strong, but the price are not anywhere dropping, and I don't see any random discounting happening at this point in time. Now, as far as launches, I think all of us have to say that this pandemic has nearly forced all of us to embrace technology and to learn how to use all kinds of virtual platform a lot faster. My joke is even my mother's on Zoom every day with me right now. So with that being said, all builders will be thinking of doing future launches in a very different way. For example, webinars in order to release pricings and floor plans and whatnot, face-to-face presentations. We are doing that with purchasers right now, so we can actually have a face-to-face virtual appointment with PowerPoints, with assets being shared, with what we call the famous worksheets coming through, signing. Fin tracking is legally possible with fin tracking IDs now. for the last step is the deposit check. We can easily send a courier to a purchaser's home. So as far as launches, even in a bigger scale, I believe that's very doable.
I'm going to shift focus to Michael Kalles now. Michael, focusing on resale, how have sales strategies changed on the resale side?
Well, frankly, thanks to you. Before I even get to that, I just wanted to say how pleased I am to be on this call, and thank you, Ben. I'm a big admirer of yours, and I follow you closely and have for many years. And Dave and Winnie, we go back many years. Winnie, our firms have been working together for, I think, close to 4.5 or 5 decades. And Dave, I follow your newsletter as it comes through about new builders. But going back to the resale and how we've changed gears, I have to give credit where credit is due. Jeremy and his department has just taken us to the next generation. We've had virtual tours probably for a decade, but now we've got 3D virtual tours, floor plans, everything is integrated. So when we went through the very most difficult times of this, from the standpoint of showings at an absolute last resort, we were able to showcase our listings digitally. In fact, 63 years later, when I said no one would ever buy a home through the internet, we sold a cottage sight unseen for north of 4 million, and we sold a house for 1.5 million in Roncesvalles. And both buyers in each case never saw the inside of the home. And again, these were different times. We're substantially better from the standpoint of face-to-face showings, but digitally has really taken off for us. And many of these things are going to continue with its digital sales meetings and virtual caravans, and featuring our listings and our properties. So it's been unfortunately, the backdrop is incredibly difficult with what's happening in our world, but it has pushed us to the next level.
What about pricing strategy? Are people setting pricing up for multiple offers, or do you feel like they're more accurate to the market value?
Well, I'm happy you asked that. I was on a conference call yesterday with Manhattan with an update on what's happening in New York, and one of the brokers, Wilkes, from one of our affiliates, Brown Harris Stevens, a 4th generation company, was saying that 75% of all firm deals are renegotiated. So the price, closings are being delayed, prices are being reduced. These are on firm deals, and it's happening 75 times out of 100. To give you perspective on Toronto, since March 15th, we have not had a single delay. We have not had an abatement of a single dollar, and every single property has closed on time at the price negotiated. So there hasn't been any negotiation for closing or price since this started.
Have you seen any evidence of price softening on new listings?
No, in fact, just to give you a quick example, I'll feature one area, Forest Hill, which is, considered, one of the 10 best areas in the world. We had a property I think it was March 19th. It came out at 5.5 million and sold for 5.4 million. We had another property that sold under multiple offers on Forest Hill Road, just north of 6.6 million. We set a record for a property that was transacted before COVID-19 took over, and it was just a shade under 10 million. And currently we firmed up on another deal at 12.6 million on Dunvegan. Again, so, I'm just outlining one area, but, to make sure I answer your question, during the most difficult times, a number of sellers were strategically pricing their properties at below market. But again, the results were, 10 offers and driving the price up. So we're seeing a combination. Each seller has their own strategy as to how they want to market the property, some at market, some below market, and drive up multiple offers.
You mentioned, when we were seeing before with these 10 offers, for listing, multiple offer scenarios still typical?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the best illustration of that is I looked quickly at statistics. In challenging times, you look at your sales more frequently. We're currently looking at them on a weekly basis. So from March 15th up to 2 weeks ago were all down weeks. We had our first good week 2 weeks ago, and to put it in perspective, we were up 149% from the week prior. And then this past week, we're up 100% from the weighted average of the months preceding that good week. But the real statistic to me was, just by way of illustration, on March 2nd, we had 155 requests to see our listings. On April 18th, we had 8. We went from 155 to 8. I'm proud to say yesterday we're at 151. So talking about a V curve on showings, we literally fell off a cliff and climbed back to where we were just prior to COVID.
I'd like to turn it back to Dave Wilkes now. Dave, you know, as investors, you know, maybe take a pause on some of the opportunities. Do you think we still have a supply problem in Toronto?
Yeah, so we certainly went into the pandemic with a supply problem. Numbers that we had been quoting from BILD for the last several years, we probably needed 50,000 homes across the GTA on an annual basis, and we're building around 38,000. So the market was out of balance. We didn't believe that that was a key reason for some of the affordability challenges and the pricing that lack of balance in the market was driving the pricing that we've all just been chatting about. I believe that there are some short-term relief in that. I talked about immigration levels being not what they were beforehand because of the restrictions on global travel, obviously. But I'm very bullish on the long-term prospects for the region. So certainly, just as Michael was saying, that's really quite encouraging numbers when you hear that the activity is coming back into the market and some of Winnie's experiences as well. So I think those are all signs that, along with the price stability, that the market and the underlying conditions of it are strong. I do believe we need to use the opportunity that we have with some potentially pause in some of the lack of balance in the market between supply and demand to change some of the practices we have. Speed up approvals. Take a hard look at the percent of government fees and taxes that relate to overall cost of a new home. They're around 25%. And really, if we don't use the you know, Michael said it the best I've heard. The backdrop of this is very difficult. It's had a tremendous impact on our health, on our society, and people have lost their lives. But at the same time, there's been a positivity and a sense of collaboration and ability to work together. And as I mentioned off the top, Jerry, some innovation. So if we don't use this time to change the way we work, to speed up approvals and have a different partnership between municipal governments and our industry to get things on track quicker, then you know, we really haven't learned the lessons that this has provided the opportunity for us to take a look at. So that's a long answer to your question. The short answer is, had a supply problem coming into it. I believe that, you know, until we get back to normal levels of immigration, that we won't see those extremes. But I honestly do believe that the GTA is going to be one of the regions globally that people will continue to want to come to. So I think we will get back to those challenging times. And if we haven't learned lessons to speed up approvals and do things differently between now and then, I think that will be a disappointment for us all. So short term, there will be a pause. Long term, I think we'll get back to where we were.
Winnie, are you seeing changes in buyer behavior, whether that's key inclusions that are being requested in product design or even location of the product?
Since the pandemic, we have been dealing with clients that are nearly all end users looking for the larger products. It's like unilateral. Now, why are they still making a decision while the world is unknown? The main reason is most of the buyers that are moving into, that's looking for a home to move into, they're thinking of long term. They're looking for the location, whether it's Thornhill, whether it's Lawrence Park, whether it's the waterfront, is the place that they can call home for a long period of time, or their last home, I should say. Now, when it comes to that, when the developer's looking at designs, most of the designs of these homes are very custom. They are home size with terraces and whatnot, but often they're one of a kind. I always make a joke, the architect never make our life easy, they're testing our IQ. A building, say, with 100 suite count, easily I'll have 90 floor plans. So these homeowners, these end users, are dissecting every floor plan when they're working from home or when they're retired at home right now. They have more time on deck. And when they're doing that, once they found that one of a kind floor plan, they have the fear to lose it. So pandemic or not pandemic, they're seeing that I'm buying future, I'm buying my permanent final home, and they want to make a decision on that. So I'm seeing a trend of that quite strongly during the last 2-3 months.
Ben, in the age of social distancing and people realizing that, how crowded it can be in urban centers, are you seeing any evidence that there's increased interest in suburbs and maybe a move back to low-rise product?
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I think people want to live in cities. I think people want to be where the action is, where their friends are, where their significant others are, where there's arts, where there's sports. So I definitely among the younger crowd, downtown is still going to be where it's at. I think there's always been a desire to be in the suburbs for families. Maybe there's a slight uptick in that, but there's just not a lot of availabilities, as Dave mentioned. The supply of new single family homes is dwindling down to nearly nothing. So there's really going to be only so many opportunities for that, and obviously commuting in this region is not easy, and it's probably only going to get worse as time goes on. So I'm glad to hear Winnie saying that we're getting more people are buying into large units. I hear a lot of criticisms of the development industry not building enough large homes, but a large home means higher prices. There's just no other way around it. And the price per square foot that a developer had typically got for large units had been lower than smaller units. So but we're starting to see that change as well. And so the price per square foot in some instances has actually gone up for larger units. So it'll be interesting to see how it shifts the market. I know in the short term, maybe there's people that are scared of being on transit. So maybe that drives more demand downtown so people can walk to work as opposed to taking transit. But if there's also a shift to more work at home, maybe people don't need to be downtown if they're only going into the office once or twice a week. Maybe they can be in Scarborough, or maybe they can be in Ajax or Whitby or out in Burlington and take the GO train in once or twice a week. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake out. But I think for the most people, don't want to work at home. They would like the flexibility of doing it once or twice a week. But I think people like the interaction. They like having someone to talk to. I mean, you can see my office in the background here. I work alone. I'm 10 hours a day by myself, and there's times that I just have to go out and grab a coffee just to talk to another human being, right? So it's not for everyone. And I think most people like to be in an office. They like the ability to go out and grab a coffee and grab lunch downtown and socialize with their coworkers. It's all part of it. So I'm not thinking we're going to see any death of the cities. And Winnie's definitely not going to be out of work selling downtown condos.
You mentioned about downtown condos. One of our largest undertaking is at the Bayside community, and we have condos up to about 5,000 square feet indoor square footage. And most of the purchasers in that community is telling us two different things. One is for the luxury market. They do not want to buy into a condo that have a lot of smaller units on the bottom and a few penthouse floors with the larger homes offered. They're more looking for the entire building, or at least majority of the building, with neighbors within the same caliber. And the other thing is, suburb is not everybody's cup of tea. Yes, we do have suburban condos, but say those who are moving downtown is always educating me saying that this is their urban cottage within Uber distance to the office.
Mike, this to Mike Kalles, what do you think? Is remote working here to stay? And what do you think that means for the 416 versus 905? Are people moving farther afield?
Well, I can tell you this. The one thing I'm seeing, firstly, I agree with what Ben's saying. The downtown will always be the downtown. I mean, people can't see that right now because they're looking at condos as cruise ships on end, based on the way they're structured. But I think Ben is correct. The downtown core will come out of this. But what we are seeing is that I'll just give as an example, anecdotally, our Muskoka office has never had a better couple of months than they have recently. 3 to 5 offers on every property at every price range. If you look at the shore, it's more expensive to buy in Muskoka than it is in Rosedale and Forest Hill per front foot. And I think the word that people are using is sanctuary. I think Ben hit the nail on the head. It's difficult, people are working at home, and I heard a great quote. I wish it was my own. They said, everyone keeps saying, we're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. Well, actually, we're not. We're all in the same storm. We're all in different boats. Some people are living hand to mouth, and some people are living in castles, right? So the way I would say it is, I think cottage country is going to become even more popular. People are going to want places outside of the city. If they are living in the city, in the downtown core, they're going to want to have a place to escape to. But I think the one thing that we're finding is that you can effectively run a business mobily. Like, I'm just looking at our example. Jeremy's at his home, I'm at my home. We speak, a couple of times a day at least. We have executive meetings more than we've ever had, twice a week when it used to be once a month. And I think that there is something that's going to transition. There are companies, big companies, Facebook, Shopify, saying that percentage, I think it was somewhere around 25% of the workforce are going to be allowed to work at home. And you're seeing that it can happen, it can be effective. But I still think there's going to be such a demand from people, specifically the high-tech sector and the younger audiences, that are always going to want to be in the core where the action is.
Dave, I'd like to bring you back in the fold. We're talking about larger units, things selling over $1 million, 5,000 square foot homes, which is all great. But at the same time, what are we going to do about the first time buyer, who I'm sure has been really impacted through all of this? Sorry, Dave, you're on mute. If you can unmute yourself. Do you have any thoughts about what we can do to help first time buyers get more engaged in this market?
Yeah, so I think there's a number of things that we can do. I think the market has a certain role to ensure that there's a wide range of products available that are not only at that luxury end, as Winnie was talking about, but do also provide that opportunity for first-time buyers. I also think there needs to be a real hard look at some of the, our bias and our preoccupation is looking at how government policies affect the marketplace. And I think there's a number of things that can be done, from lengthening amortization rates for unsecured mortgages, to taking a hard look at the mortgage stress test. Some of the new proposals that CMHC have come out with. I know Ben talked about those earlier. I think some of those are quite frankly the wrong policy at this time, and have a bit of a bias against home ownership, which concerns me. So I think there are a number of tools that we can look at to address affordability, particularly in the first time buyer. But Jeremy, I really do believe it comes back to the question of supply. That we need to make sure that we are building more homes, both for all types of buyers and first-time buyers in particular. And I didn't talk about earlier some of the opportunities that we have in the 905 area about designating lands for growth now. We do know that the region is going to return to growth, in my opinion. So let's make some decisions over this current period of time to understand where that growth will happen. Let's invest in infrastructure in those areas, whether it's new roadways or sewage solutions up in Upper York, as an example. So all of those will affect our ability to have a balanced market. And I think that will have the greatest impact, if you will, on affordability across all product types. So that's where we focus our attention right now.
I'm just looking at the conversation that we've had, and I realize I haven't addressed commercial. I really don't know who's the right person to throw this out to, but I'll throw it to Ben, Winnie, or Mike, whoever feels like they've got the right exposure to this side of the business. What do you think for the future of commercial real estate values? I mean, we see companies like RioCan getting more involved on the residential side. Is that alluding to the fact that there's less interest in traditional commercial space?
I would just jump in quickly to say, if you look at RioCan, what they're doing is they're building on air rights, and they're building on parking lots, and they're building. So they're not changing gears. They've always been, if you look on Avenue Road, they built a tower there. They did a joint venture at Yonge and Eglinton. so I think what you have to look at with regards to REITs like RioCan is they're saying to themselves, look, we have a power center here, but above this power center, what do we have? We've got the air rights. We're just going to throw 30 stories above that, and their land acquisition cost is zero. So, but that sort of touches upon, you know, the transition of areas of specialty from REITs. But if you want to focus on commercial real estate, I think everything is going to be different. I think that if you look at industrial, it's never been hotter. We have experience with a development that just signed a lease with a tenant. It's been there for 9 years. They just pre-signed, their lease doesn't expire for a year. They just pre-signed with a triple net rent 40% higher on a 5-year lease, because this is the future of logistics, right? So when you order something from Amazon, it doesn't come from Amazon. It gets, you know, there's logistic companies who are moving product all over the province and all over the world. So industrial slash with combination of office is very popular. There is going to be a bit of a challenge. I mean, if you look at Class A space in Toronto, you know, Toronto created more high-tech jobs than the Silicon Valley and Washington State combined in the last 3 years, and they're eating up Class A and B space in the core. It's to be determined what's going to happen down there. So, but the real challenge, I think, is going to be, you know, if you look at, I'll just use as an example, you know, the Eglinton Way, you know, between the Allen and Avenue Road as an example. Well, you know, everyone's so happy because the subway is coming through, you know, the LRT, but the challenge is there's a lot of cafes and restaurants that have been negatively affected along that way and across other major thoroughfares in Toronto. So the, you know, the commercial, which is retail on the main floor and res above, the retail on the main floor is going to be affected again because of restaurants and cafes.
Okay, well, listen, we've covered a lot of great ground today, and I appreciate everyone's time. I'm going to throw one last question, and I'd like each one of you to weigh in on it. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but look into your crystal ball. What do you see for Q3 and Q4 for 2020, starting with Ben Myers, please?
Yeah, so I'm bullish by nature. I think jobs will start to come back, but I think it'll be maybe a slow recovery, right? I think people will start to go back to restaurants. People will start to go back and using retail. I'm already seeing lineups outside of IKEA and in Winners and HomeSense in some areas. I think people like to do their shopping, like to touch and feel. I ordered a lot of stuff on Amazon, but yeah, it's a hit and miss sometimes what you end up getting, right? So I do think people are going to want to get back out there and shop. I think our real estate market is extremely resilient. I think there's just a huge amount of what we call latent demand. A lot of adults still living with their parents. We have people in their mid-30s and even 40s living with roommates because they can't afford things. So I think they're still looking to move out. I think a lot of people don't move to the GTA because they can't afford anything. So I think if prices flatten out a little bit, that would bring more people into the GTA and maybe prevent others from moving out. I know Dave touched a bit on the amount of units that we need, but I don't think that's the right metric. It's the amount of square footage and the amount of bedrooms that we need. And we're building probably 20-25% less bedrooms in square footage than we did in 2002. Right, so we're just not providing the amount of supply that needs to come into this marketplace, and so we'll continue to see price increases over the long term. And I think investors see that, as Winnie mentioned, people see the appreciation, and I don't ever see a point where we're going to get where we're just delivering so much more supply than we ever need. Just because of the way that our program works and the pre-sale requirements and the conservative lending environment that we're in. So I'm still bullish on the market. It might be some short-term pain in 2020, but I think in 2021 you'll see all the developers launching projects again, and I anticipate investors will getting back in, and we're already seeing the recovery in the resale market. So the resale market tends to lead the new home market. So I'm expecting a very strong fall in the resale market in Toronto.
Thank you. Dave Wilkes.
Yeah, so I think we're going to see some choppiness over the short term. I don't know how to define that short term in the next 16 or 18 months, but I think we are going to see some choppiness. But from the beyond that, once we get to a spot where some of the restrictions that we are currently living under aren't in place, I am incredibly bullish on the long-term future of the market too. I believe the GTA is recognized as one of the best regions to live in the world, and because of that, I think we'll be fine. So I think it's going to be an uneven market. I'm a little less positive than Ben in the immediate, but very much in the same space as we look beyond that over the next 12 to 18 months and beyond.
Thank you. Winnie Chan?
As I mentioned earlier, when you look back to the last many crises that we went through in the Toronto market or a global market, in the matter of fact, those examples are standstill markets when things are frozen. In this past 3 months, things are not standstill, and we're already seeing a recovery from May and June. Now, all the clienteles that we're dealing with are smart enough to understand that construction cost is not going to drop. Land cost is not going to drop. Our government is not going to change on the cost. So how can there be a price correction after things are normalizing? So I would say summer is summer. We're all coming back to work and coming out of the mode of working from home. It probably will be a slower takeoff because of the summer seasons and whatnot, but I can see that a developer will start doing some launches, spreading out from fall to spring next year. And I do see a normalization. As I said, the majority of the Toronto purchasers, investors, or end users alike are very seasoned. They have seen it many times. How many times that you see the price is overpriced or something's shaky in the marketplace? So you go to hands off, and then years afterwards you look back and say, I wish I bought 3. When you look back to Toronto Trap's the numbers, when you go from the 70s, some of you might be too young for that, but when you look from the 70s all the way up to now, the curve has some shakiness, but it's going one way. So I don't think this pandemic is going to do anything different. So we need months to recover, but things are still looking very resilient and optimistic.
Thank you. Michael Kalles, we'll give you the last word. But you're on mute.
Thank you about that. I mean, there's a few things. I always like to say, if you look back in the last 50 years, if you bought a house and held it for 7 years, you made money, no matter when you bought, when you sold. If you held it for 7 years, sorry, I want to restate that. If you bought it, held it for 7 years, you made money on it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we're talking about the employment situation, which of course was a lot more positive in the US and Canada in the last report. But the one thing that I think is important, if you look at the number of jobs lost, 82% of them were in either part-time, low-paying jobs or full-time, low-paying jobs. So only 18% of full-time, high-paying jobs have been affected by this terrible situation. The reason why I bring that up is because the demand continues. I'll just read quickly on statistics here. Detached homes last month in May, sold price as a percentage of list, 99%. Condo apartments, 99% of list. Semi-detached, 103% of list. So it tells you what's happening in the marketplace. The demand is there. And so to answer your question on how am I feeling bullish, if the next 2 quarters are going to be taking week by week, but in terms of long term, geopolitically, I always say this: the more you look around the world, the better Toronto looks. And I think the world is starting to recognize that. As Dave said, it's being recognized by magazines like The Economist, one of the best places to live, low crime, healthcare provided for all. It's an amazing, amazing city, and it's gathering now the attention of the world. In the old days, you couldn't call Toronto a world city. Now you can. And I think in the real metrics, the ones that count, Toronto is a world city, and the world is recognizing us. So thank you, Jeremy, for including me, and I appreciate it.
Great. Well, okay. Well, that's a great way to end. And, you all know me a little bit, so you'll know I'm a man of my word. I promised you'd be out of here in exactly 1 hour, and here we are with 1 minute to spare. So thank you all very much for your time.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Jeremy, can you stay on for 1 minute?
Yeah.
Take care,
Thanks
guys.
so much. I just want to ask you one question. Thanks, everyone.
Jeremy, fantastic facilitator.
Thank you so much, Winnie.
Fantastic. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Winnie.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.